welcome into the latest edition of the Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Colby Conway, at Colby R. Conway. And with me, as always, the Selz man. So Matt Selz, it's been about a week and a half or so since I last talked to you, at least via a microphone. So how is everything going for you, my friend?
Not too bad. Not too bad. We're gearing up for baseball here. This is the 31st of January, so we're not too far away from pitchers and catchers reporting and full team workouts happening down in sunny Arizona and sunny Florida. And less than a month away from spring training games happening, and we got NASCAR ramping up. So it's getting to be my time of the year here with sports and whatnot.
Yep, absolutely. And we're getting close to the big date, which, a lot of people is like pitchers and catchers reporting, which always happens around my birthday. So it's however you want to look at it. If you want to say it's my birthday that the pitchers and catchers are reporting, or my birthday just happens to be around that time, however you want to look at it. But we are getting close to that time of the year, which is exciting. And of course, that means a ton of content is going to be coming out here at fantasyalarm.com. So make sure you're following along for the draft guide. We got the free agent tracker, where Matt and I are updating everything. I just spent riveting minutes yesterday on the 30th, as you're listening to this, writing up the exquisite Josh Harrison and Zach Greinke signings. So that's just kind of show you how in-depth this tracker is going for some guys that Matt and I were talking about a little bit beforehand. Better reality than fantasy.
Is Zach Greinke going to be able to afford the guacamole now at his favorite Mexican joint? Or not? Have you seen that quote that's recirculating?
I have not. All I've been too fixated on is seeing how high his ERA is going to regress this year.
Yeah, he apparently back in 2009 made a comment about how guac was too expensive at his favorite Mexican restaurant, and he was very disappointed to see that it went up 30 cents.
Well, inflation's a real thing.
But that was from 2009, so I'm not sure what it is now. I don't typically add guac, but I wonder if the free agent signing will now allow him to, spring for the extra guac.
You sure hope so. Hopefully, what springing he does for the guac, maybe it keeps the ERA down a bit, because was very pessimistic. Spoiler alert in the write-up. There's not much going for him with all the rules going this year.
75 miles an hour, it's hard to not get hit by major league hitters.
That is very true. So, we'll read the tracker. All the free agent updates are there. And we're going to have a ton of great content coming out here at fantasyalarm.com. And I think if I remember last time we talked with the Fantasy Alarm MLB draft guide, I think it's everybody's favorite 4-letter word this year, if I'm not mistaken. And I think it rhymes with me or we. I think it's something like that.
It is completely free. That's free for free, like those, tax commercials. It is, in fact, a free draft guide. It has all sorts of strategy pieces coming out. I've already written 3 or 4 of them. I'm writing one about the players to target with the shift ban now in place for 2023. Some of the other rule changes in place, like there's, I believe the pitch clock comes to MLB this year. We got bigger bases, too. So interesting to see what will happen with stolen bases. We've got the cheat sheet that's in there. My prospect player rankings are a part of that. My dynasty rankings are a part of that. We'll have other rankings. Colby's got pieces coming out. We got player capsules. It's all going to drop on the 1st of February or fairly soon after, and it's all free. So look for that starting February 1st up on Fantasy Alarm.
And building on that, too, it's going to be a lot of stuff by position as well. Like I know I have the very riveting catcher and second base positions this year that I'll be diving in on. So as a former catcher, I wanted to have that opportunity. So I messaged John. And I was like, listen, I'll take the catchers. Let me go with the catchers. It's not the sexiest
fall on that sword for everybody?
I sure am. Someone's got to do it. You know what I mean? Someone's got to do it. So it is going to be me. But, last time we had a full agenda on the last pod. If you haven't listened to it, make sure you check that out, where Matt and I basically went in on what's actually who is actually a sleeper, what constitutes someone being a sleeper, what negative ROI does one have to return to be considered a bust. That is all in the last episode of the podcast. So make sure you check that out wherever you listen to your podcast, wherever it may be. I believe you should probably subscribe to our podcast as well. That's also probably something else that I should say there. But one thing we wanted to talk about last week was some early draft trends that we are seeing and a couple interesting things to touch on. And that was going to be looped in at the end of last episode, but we ran out of time. So now that is going to be the highlight of this episode. But before we get to that, a couple news and notes that we want to hit. Matt, I'm sure this one has to have you a little bit giddy, to say the least, but it looks like in Baltimore, Grayson Rodriguez, someone we were hoping to see in 2022 before, I believe it was a shoulder ailment that basically
lat. I think it was
railroaded it. Yeah, lat. So railroaded seeing him in 2022, but it basically sounds like, a lot can happen. I don't want to guarantee anything, but it sounds like a damn near guarantee that Rodriguez is breaking camp with the team in the starting rotation. So what should fantasy managers be expecting with Rodriguez? I mean, here, at least in the early going of 2023. And then secondly, how terrified are you of this ADP jump that he's about to get?
He's going to get a massive ADP jump because he's been one of the highest touted prospects in a very long time. He's among my top 3 pitching prospects in the game, if not the best one. I know some others have, he's basically a top 3 pitching prospect across the industry, no matter who you look at, and for good reason. He's got ace quality stuff. He's shown that throughout his minor league career to this point, and like you said, he would have come up last year had a lat injury not derailed his season halfway through AAA. He was just dominating down there. He threw almost 70 innings at AAA last year. Apologize for any noise in the background. My dog has decided that this is the time to chew a bone. But threw almost 70 innings at AAA last year. He pitched to a 2.2 ERA, 2.04 FIP for those of you that like FIP, 2.90 xFIP. So all of those suggest that he was quite good. He also posted 12.5 strikeouts per 9, which translates to a 35.8 strikeout rate for those of you that like the percentage-based one. Now, all of that being said, do not expect him to come up and blow the doors off the joint in the AL East. Okay, sure. Baltimore became a lot more pitcher-friendly last year when they made their left field wall the deepest in all of baseball. But he's got the rest of the AL East to contend with there. He's also a rookie. Rookies take some beatings early on unless you're incredibly spectacular, which most rookies are not. So I would expect him to make about 25 starts, assuming health and everything. And I would say maybe about a 3.7 ERA probably. And I'll go between about 9.5 and 10 strikeouts per 9 for him. So that's pretty reasonable. It's not elite level, pretty reasonable from a rookie, but his ADP is going to take a massive jump. So you have 2 ways to approach this. Either you draft him now in best balls where ADP still hasn't caught up yet, or you hope he takes a little bit of a shellacking in the spring so that when draft time comes, some of the shine and polish has been knocked off of him and you get him for a better deal, even though he'll still be in the rotation. Like, that's kind of, you don't want to do in the middle before he's made any spring starts, or worst comes to worst, he makes 3 spring starts and he strikes everybody out and everybody's losing their minds. And then you're not touching Grayson Rodriguez because he's going to cost too much in drafts.
The interesting thing, and you hit this inadvertently, because my next question to you is going to be, where is his innings cap going to be? Because it's inevitable, right? He threw like 75-ish innings last year. Then he had the lat shoulder that derailed things a little bit. So I think you're doing it right, kind of saying like 25-ish starts is probably where you're looking at. But, Baltimore tends, at least to me, they seem like they might be a bit more careful. So, I mean, if he's going to get 25 starts, are you thinking maybe maybe it's not necessarily an innings limit per se, but it's like, hey, we're going to get 25 starts from this kid and we're going to cap 80 to 85 pitches for each one. And we're going to try to avoid the triple digits per start in terms of pitch count.
Yeah, I would assume so. Baltimore is pretty renowned for developing their talent right now. Also, keep in mind their GM was the assistant GM in Houston, who has had a magical run of developing starters. I mean, they lost Justin Verlander, and you can make the argument that their rotation is just as good without Verlander in it as it was with him in it. So yeah, I mean, if you work it out and you go, okay, like 5 innings a start for 25 starts, that's about 125 innings, right? I think that's probably his cap.
I think you're right. I think it's what it's going to come out to. And you also inadvertently hit on this as well. I think worst case scenario from a fantasy perspective with Rodriguez, and it's kind of a double-edged sword, comes out in the spring, mows people down, absolutely dominates, and we're now going to pay at ceiling for a guy that we're going into the year knowing that this innings limit is, right. I mean, it's virtually inevitable. It has to happen.
It's going to be because he only pitched about, you said about 75 or so innings last year across the minors because he had a couple of rehab starts to begin the year and then really settled into AAA. And we've talked about previously where they don't really like to jump innings for pitchers by more than 35 a season.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you do the math there, if it's 75 and you're jumping it by 35, that's 110. So I think 125 might be pushing it a little bit. But yeah, I wouldn't overpay because even if his ratios are good, even if his strikeouts are good, there's going to be a limited number of them because of the innings cap that they're going to have on him. Because Baltimore, I don't think is going to make the playoffs. They just want him and Adley Rutschman to get into a groove so that starting next year they can really start to make their push.
Yep, absolutely. And that AL East, we're going to talk about that here in a little bit, probably a little bit later as well, but more so in a little bit before we get there. Former, can I call him a Washington standout? Am I allowed to do that? Like I do with basically anybody who leaves the Pirates, I say former Pittsburgh great. Am I allowed to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I mean, I was a big fan of his in Washington, so yeah, we can go with that.
Okay, we'll go with that. So former Washington standout, former Washington great Michael A. Taylor heads to Minnesota in a deal for 2 left-handed pitchers. So Matt, give me your thoughts on the trade, and then my second question that I'm going to lead you into it. Taylor's a pretty good defensive outfielder, to say the least. Do we see Byron Buxton DH at all to try to preserve his health and let Taylor play in center field in 2023?
It's possible. It certainly opens the door to that possibility because right now their DH bat is not as full-fledged as Buxton is, which, there's a lot of, when Buxton is healthy, he is, I think, inarguably a top 10 player on offense in baseball. But the question with Buxton is he going to stay healthy? Because he's failed to play 100 games in basically every season he's ever played in the majors. And now you have a Gold Glove center fielder who can take his place or can play there while you save Buxton. So I think that opens a variety of routes for Minnesota. It's certainly insurance for when Buxton gets injured, not if. And so yeah, I think it opens a variety of options. I don't think it's going to eat Buxton's at bats. They're clearly not taking him out if they don't have to. And DH won't kill you. He'll certainly play enough in the outfield to keep his outfield eligibility. It's not like he'll go into next year being a util only guy. I just think it's an insurance trade.
And I mean, Taylor's a good one to have too, because what do we say with Buxton? Excellent offensive when healthy, excellent defensive when healthy. So with Taylor, a good defensive player in his own right, at least defensively speaking, you're not sacrificing anything there if you do try the Buxton at DH experiment. And looking at this team, like I'm looking at roster resource right now, I get it. Platoon effects going to switch depending on righty or lefty, but right now they have Nick Gordon as the starting DH.
That's like Michael A is a better bat than Nick Gordon.
Yeah, and it's just a matter of, we talked, I think we talked about it last year on the podcast. Do we see Buxton at the DH spot? And I'm trying to look up here if we got anything
theoretically
like that,
what you could do, to be perfectly honest, is you could take Gallo out of left field, put him at DH, move Buxton to left field, put Michael A in center. That way there's less wear and tear on Buxton, and you get both bats, and you improve your outfield defense, and you get Nick Gordon out of the DH spot.
That's an option too.
Because Gallo in left field is atrocious.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, Gallo
there's a
in
lot
batter's
about
box
Gallo.
is atrocious too. But
yeah, I was gonna say, you said it, not me. So now you're the bad guy, not me. But
I mean, come on, it's not like it's not common knowledge that he's atrocious.
that is not a hot take. That is 100% certain. But just had to touch on that trade a little bit. Anything from the return from the Royals was like 2 relievers. Guy was in the double and triple A most of last year. Anything to write home about those guys, or it's just another deal?
It's just another deal. It's like a depth piece for a couple of depth pieces. Kansas City has had some trouble recently developing their ones. Like the people, including myself, thought that they would have a pretty good 4-headed rotation given their last couple of drafts across starting pitchers with, Daniel Lynch and Bubeck and Jackson Kovar. And the only one that seems to have panned out for that entire group is Brady Singer, who had a deceptively good season last year. And so I think, Brad Keller's decent too. So I think it's just depth pieces that they just want more arms.
Yep. I can see that too. And then a couple things here. We did get some park news, which is always exciting. And hopefully you agree with me. One is much more exciting than the other, if I'm being honest. I
think they're both exciting, but one is more exciting.
For sure. So one of them, Detroit, their field is going to become a little less, I'm going to say a little less pitcher friendly, just a little bit. So we'll talk about that one a little bit, but the main one we got to talk about is Toronto. They're just going to say, screw it. We're going to go for 15 runs a game. We're just going to have fun with an offensive firework display every single night, just adding to the allure of the American League East in that division. So, first off, let's start with this. I mean, okay, so we see it in Colorado. If you're a ground ball hitter, you go to Colorado, you're not going to become a 30 home run guy. So the park upgrade is not going to fix swings. But, for some of those guys that were like, I'm doing like those best balls on underdog, I have the 2nd overall pick. I took Yordan. This news came out. I moved Vladdy Jr. up to like number 2, put him in that home park with slightly upgraded thing. So what do we do here with these park upgrades? And I want to start with Toronto because, again, that's the more exciting one given the state of affairs in that offense.
So they've turned Toronto into a softball field, basically. Like I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure there's an adult softball field like a mile from my house that's deeper in right center than Toronto's going to be at this point. Like it's laughably short. The only way they're going to be able to keep balls out of this park is if they turn the air conditioning vents on and blow the air towards the fans sitting behind home plate. That's the only way that this is going to keep balls into park. So yeah, people I think are going to overreact to this though, saying that. I think now moving Vladdy Jr. up to number 2, I don't think is an overreaction. I think he's top 5. This bumps him a little bit because now you get more power numbers, more runs driven in probably. But it's not going to make like Bo Bichette or Kevin Biggio top 8 players, right? Like you're not all of a sudden moving Kevin Kiermaier into your top 4 rounds because, now he's in a homer park. Well, no, it's still Kevin Kiermaier. It's still Kevin Biggio, right? So don't overreact. I would move him up a little bit. But yeah, it's also going to help AL East hitters as a whole because obviously they all have to go to Toronto and go play there, 8-9 times a season. The side effect is I'm not sure how I'm liking this for Toronto pitchers. And I have to use I took a voucher last year in my home league, which allows me to extend a guy 1 year past when I'm supposed to be able to extend him in contracts. And I was going to use it on either Walker Buehler or Chris Bassett. And then Buehler wound up needing Tommy John. So clearly I'm not going to extend Buehler because he's going to be useless next year. So I was going to use it for Chris Bassett, which, going to Toronto from Citi Field, not a great turnaround, but I think he's good enough to hold his own. But now with these wall moves, it's a little disconcerting because not only did they move the walls in, they shortened them too. So I'm a little concerned with the pitching. Also, it's also curious to me that they did this before Vlad Jr. hit his arbitration years, or that they tried to buy out his arbitration years. Because now you're going to let him tee off and then try to sign him long term after you've just artificially blown up his numbers. That's a little interesting from a financial standpoint. Detroit's wall moves are interesting. I saw an animation the other day put together by some stats folks from MLB that basically said since 2019, if they had been playing in the dimensions they'll have in 2023, over those 4 years, there would have been 38 more home runs hit in Comerica than there were. So over 4 years, you're talking basically just under 10 extra home runs total a year, not just for the Tigers, but in terms of every game played there. So it's a little bit of help. I'm not sure it's as much as Toronto's, but it'll help a little bit.
Yeah, and when you look at Toronto's pitchers, I mean, could this create a buying opportunity? Because I'm looking through the numbers here. Gosman's arsenal's led by that. I think his is technically a splitter, I believe.
Yeah.
And then you got like Alek Manoah, Jose Barrios are both kind of 40% ground ball guys. Bassett's always been right around that low 40 mark. And then last year it jumped to 48% with the Mets. If he can sustain that ground ball rate, maybe, just maybe he can offset this. And if everyone's going to reverse Toronto offense this and basically say, well, I can't do Bassett now in the American League East, maybe there's a buying opportunity with these guys. I think maybe it's going to be more so of a cautiously optimistic type endeavor when looking at these guys in drafts.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were expecting Bassett to be, would you say expecting him to be an SP2, like a low-end SP2 this year before the wall move was decent?
Mm-hmm.
Or you have him more as an SP3 before the wall move?
Probably I think you got to move 3, I think.
Yeah, I think you got to move him down to a low-end SP3 or an SP4 now, I think is what happens.
Yeah, and when you look at it here, I mean, this includes relievers, but since January 1st, Bassett's about the 61st pitcher off the board.
Which in 12-team leagues would be the 5th pitcher.
He's around pick 154, so you're talking 12th round is 144, so you're around the 13th round in 12-team formats. I mean, at that point, if he slips anywhere below that, I mean, the starters after him, Dustin May, Luis Garcia, always injured, Chris Sale, Jordan Montgomery. There are some guys I really like there, Sands, Sale, but like maybe there's an opportunity here.
Bassett, I would still take Bassett over those guys.
Yeah, and I mean, but this is the thing though with this news. If we're all going to overreact, like, would you be surprised if May, Garcia, Sale, and Montgomery all went above Bassett because I can't have Bassett now because the fence has moved in 8 feet, so he's now going to go from a sub 1 homer per 9 guy to a 4 home run per 9 guy. That's a bit of an overreaction, but
I think there's buying opportunities.
Yeah. And even maybe with some of the bigger guys too, with like Gausman and Manoah, if they swap or if they slip down a couple of spots, they have enough swing and miss stuff that, whether the fences are at the edge of the infield or where they're at normally, they'll still miss.
You still have to, these guys still have to hit it to get it over the fence. Correct. And the other thing is that I would say that Toronto's outfield defense has improved this year with their moves that they've made. I mean, that's again assuming health, but we always want to assume health and never want to assume people get injured except for Byron Buxton. But assuming health with George Springer, likely Dalton Varsho, Kiermaier, and then you could even sprinkle in Whit Merrifield could rotate in there with Biggio playing second. I think that's a decent enough outfield that they may actually be able to get to some of those balls and rob some homers, even with the the closer walls.
I'm not expecting a ton, but I'm a little worried that where I'm getting Whit Merrifield at in drafts, I'm not going to be able to get him much there anymore. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's not going to be a 30 home run guy now with this move, but every little bit will help. And he came on a little bit down the stretch, and obviously he can run a little bit. So just a guy that I'm keep my eye on a little bit.
By the way, you want a sleeper here? Brandon Belt.
I still can't believe he's in Toronto.
I mean, okay, but like, is there any better park swap for a hitter this offseason than going from San Fran to Toronto?
No, it's just I'm gonna have to get used to not seeing him in those orange threads.
I mean, true. There is that.
But I mean, he's been. I mean, like, think about it. He's been with the Giants since I was in high school. Like when I got my driver's license, he was with the Giants all the way through.
Yeah,
that's insane.
I mean, he and Brendan Crawford were the keys to that whole run. Like they're building blocks for their whole run.
Yep. No, I do like Belt a good bit, to say the least. I can't argue with you there. But Matt, we talked about it a little bit already. Draft guide, it's going to be free here at fantasyalarm.com. Check it out. All the strategy pieces. I'm sure there's going to be like rankings. There's going to be the projections on the site. We're going to have everything there, strategy pieces, positional previews, spotlights, all of that.
Debates.
And everything. Player debates. Oh, man, I think 2 years ago I debated Buxton, and that one weighed on me a little bit. I was wrong, but
I mean, no matter what side of that you take, you're wrong.
That's true. That is
He's
very
the only guy that if you're pro or con, you're in the wrong on Byron Buxton.
I guess we all agree on something. Am I right?
Yeah.
But anyway, Matt, let's talk a little bit of early draft trends here, about 15 or so minutes left. Just talk some early draft trends that we are seeing. So obviously we've done player capsules for multiple teams. We've done a couple drafts. I think I'm on 4 or 5 best ball drafts now on Underdog. We'll come back to that in a bit. But what have you seen from a positional standpoint that it's like, hey, either, maybe this position is high in top tier talent, but the depth is absolute garbage. So don't miss out on there, or you're stuck waiting because there's something. Obviously, relievers is very fickle in its own right because it will forever be that way and it will never change. But any position of note to you that is just eye-popping in terms of maybe it's a lack of top-end talent, there's absolutely no depth or anything like that?
So in terms of eliteness, I think the deepest position is shortstop. I think you can go quite deep in shortstop and find a guy that you would be perfectly fine being your starting option for shortstops. Like looking at ADP right now on NFBC from January 1st through today, so basically the entire month of January, and I'm seeing let's do this. So the 12th shortstop is Tim Anderson. Okay. 13th is Willie Ademis, who I'd be fine with. Jeremy Pena is somehow still the 14th shortstop off the board. The guy who he replaced, Carlos Correa, is 15th because everybody's concerned that the 12th year of a contract is going to, screw him over in 2023. It's not, folks. He'll be fine this year. He's the 15th. Ahmed Rosario is 16th. And you go all the way down to Javi Baez at 18th, who's okay, right? Like, the cutoff is probably after Ahmed Rosario. But that's 16 starting shortstops that I'm okay with nabbing. And then you could go a little bit upside with, can CJ Abrams actually put it together? Can Ezekiel Tovar have a heck of a season in his rookie year in Colorado, knowing what shortstops typically do in Colorado? He's 25th off the board. Luis Garcia for the Nats, not the pitcher, the second baseman / shortstop, is 27th off the board. So, like, there is ridiculous depth at shortstop. In terms of positions where you've got to strike soon, I would say it might be corner infield, might be the shallowest.
Yep. Like
third base right now, the top 8 third basemen are Jose Ramirez, Bobby Witt, Machado, Riley, Devers, Arenado, Bregman, Gunnar Henderson. After that, it's Muncy, Jose Miranda, Eugenio Suarez, Matt Chapman. Like, Cabrian Hayes is a sleeper there, right? Mm-hmm. But, like, in terms of bona fide dudes that you trust, there's probably 8.
Yes. So Shortstop is so fascinating because it's very deep. Like you said, like any of those 16 that you mentioned, cool with. Even Javi Baez, I'm okay with him there at 18. But when you look at this, of course, I'm talking ceiling here. You could have 5 shortstops go 30-30 this year. Now, again, that's a very, very big stretch, but Turner, Witt, Bichette, Tatis, O'Neal, Cruz, like there is enough juice for potentially 5 players at this position to go 30-30. That is insane. Just simply put, absolutely insane.
If Tim Anderson stays healthy, is there a shot he goes?
I mean, the fact that you can even make a case for 6 is insane. Like, there's not many positions that can do that. Now, again, will it happen? No, I know that, but it's worth mentioning. Like this, you don't have to take and like one of the first 2 shortstops or 3 shortstops because it thins out pretty quick, so I kind of have to. At third base, you might want to because you have the first Ramirez and Bobby Witt. Witt's got shortstop too, but exciting. Yeah. I like those 2. But then Machado, Riley, Devers, although you'll see in the draft guide, but Devers guy I'm not very high on this year. But
yeah, I'm not either, mainly because of his surrounding cast. But.
Yeah, and you're talking average and power there, so you might as well wait around and take Arenado. Then you got boring old Bregman at 7, chase upside with Henderson at 8. Then power and strikeout, Suarez, Chapman. I love Ke'Bryan Hayes. After that, no thank you. Third base is a bit rough. To me, even looking at it, I cannot stand second base.
Yeah, that would be
I cannot stand this position.
Yeah. Obviously, by the way, catcher is the shallowest. We all know that. We're just skipping over it because there's like 3 dudes you could draft a catcher and everybody else is a crapshoot. But second base, I think you're right. There's maybe 5.
There are 5 second basemen.
I know, but like Simeon, Altuve, Jazz Chisholm still counts as a second baseman.
Correct.
Albies, Edman.
Those are 5. Yeah.
I mean, right now, based on ADP, those are the top 5.
For sure. When I'm like the drafts I've done looking at second base.
Between Albies and Edman. Because
correct.
Albies is in the top 50, Edman's 72nd. And then Jimenez is 82nd. And then the next one is Gleyber Torres at 115.
Yeah, this position sucks.
Yeah, it's very bad.
Like I like Jazz. I'm out on Semien this year. He's another bust guy of mine, so I don't like him that much. I like Jazz up there. I like Edman for speed. And then after that, honestly, at second base, in these drafts that I've done, I've just hung out and absolutely smashed the draft button on Jonathan India and Whit Merrifield. Because at that point, I'm going to take that price, and I don't really want to pay 3rd, 4th round for Semien Altuve. I'll just wait and hope for the best between India and Merrifield.
You know who's intriguing to me way down the list is a guy who's currently 20th off the board is Ketel Marte.
I thought you were going to talk about biceps Lux.
No, I'm kind of out on Lux. I just don't think the bat is playing as well.
Whoa, you don't mean the pictures of him flexing with his biceps or just not getting you in? Best shape of their life season here in January?
You don't have to be jacked to play baseball, though. That's the problem. I think Ketel Marte is intriguing to me at 20.
Agreed. But again,
that Diamondbacks offense is, I think, better than people give it credit for. And they're going to have, with Alec Thomas and Corbin Carroll coming up and Jake McCarthy, you've got 3 dudes who could steal 25 bags. And that kind of base movement in front of Ketel Marte in some form or fashion in a circular lineup means he could actually produce some runs.
And listen, I'm not saying we're the be-all, end-all of fantasy analysis and expertise, but all we've done is crap on the top couple guys, and all we've done is hype up the current second baseman, the 14th, the 16th, and the 20th. So I think that's what you need to know about second base.
I mean, it's just like I'm okay with any of the top 5. It depends on what you want, right?
Minus Semien.
Not going to give you, minus Semien. Like Altuve will give you a decent mix of everything. Chisholm could, if he stays healthy, he's got the pop and speed to go at least 25-30. Albies, I'm always concerned about batting average and where he'll hit in their order. Edman is basically speed. So there's not a whole lot of combo. Like we were talking about shortstops, there could be 5 30-30 shortstops. There's not going to be, there may be one 30-30 second baseman, and he'll technically qualify as an outfielder by the end of the season.
Well, you said it. Let's talk about outfield, because I'm going to say it this way. I'm going to lump this whole position in. They're lucky Jazz Chisholm's coming to the outfield for fantasy eligibility. I have struggled with outfield in these best ball drafts because I've waited. I've tacked outfield early. I've waited on outfield, and I have not liked what's happened when I've waited on outfield.
So here's my big thing with outfield. To me, the depth clearly depends on if you're in a 3 outfield league or a 5 outfield league.
Of course.
My home league is a 5 outfield league. The depth, and it's also like, well, this year it's going to be like 18 teams. So the depth goes ridiculously fast, right? So the elite guys go, and they go quick. If you're in a 3 outfield league, I think there's more. Like if you're in a 12-team league with 3 outfielders, I think there's more than enough depth in outfield to be fine, because you're talking about 36 starting outfielders, right? Mm-hmm. And so in that league, the 36 starting outfielder is Hunter Renfroe. The 37th is Ian Happ, Nimmo, Bader. I mean, none of these guys are outstanding, but they're decent, right? Happ's got pop, Nimmo score runs, Bader can steal some bags. But if you get past that, like the fact that Lars Nootbaar is the 43rd outfielder off the board is a problem. Like, I just don't see it for him. But I would agree that if you are in a very deep outfield league, outfield can be a very big problem.
And even like on Underdog, when I'm doing these best ball drafts, like I can't even tell you if I did not attack outfield in the beginning, it was a how do I say, a bit of a rough go. So like, for example, on this one, I had the 2nd overall pick. I took Jordan. This is the only one I've actually completed. Everyone else I'm still in the midst of doing. I then waited until round 6, and then outfielder. I went back-to-back outfielders round 6 and 7, and ended up with Taylor Ward and Nick Castellanos.
That's a problem.
So not to mention that we come back with Conforto, who I think I'm going to end up with in every draft because he's just there every single time. And then honestly, the outfielders I've liked the most are the last 2 I took, and Brian De La Cruz, who you'll read about in the draft guide, and Max Kepler. I mean, outfield has been rough. And this best ball draft that I did in Underdog, it started with 6 straight outfielders. Of course, Ohtani is included in outfielder and Underdog, but there was an outfielder 8 of the first 9 picks in this one.
Yeah, so I guess my question becomes, I think you can either have a couple of very good outfielders and then fill it out with dudes who can just play the position, but you're not really happy with. Or you can wait and put together, I think, a reasonably balanced outfield, not full of big names, but like reasonably balanced. I think it's going to be hard to get a balanced outfield. I think it's the problem. Because if you go with top flight outfielders, you've just sacrificed third base, second base, and first base, which you need elite bats there because otherwise they fall off a cliff. So I think the biggest thing for outfield this year is going to be finding a way to get a balanced outfield where you're not sacrificing depth or fantasy relevance at other shallower positions. Like you could punt catcher because everybody but 3 people are going to be punting catcher.
Yeah, and like this one, I waited until the 6th round to take my first outfielder. Since round 6, we're now in round 17. I've now taken like 6 outfielders, and I have Seiya Suzuki, Lars Nootbaar, Cody Bellinger, Trey Mancini, Michael Conforto, and Brian De La Cruz. So that one I didn't take one in the beginning like I did with now. Of course, I don't have a Jordan making it look better.
That's true.
But, in that one, then, you're starting off Vlad Guerrero, Max Scherzer, Brandon Woodruff, Jose Abreu, Corey Seager. You got to love that.
Yeah, by the way, according to NFBC ADP for the month of January, Jordan's the 5th outfielder off the board.
Yep. Now, and again, that could be partially too, with like on Underdog, it's points based. So he's going to get a little bit of a boost because he doesn't run. But regardless, still a top tier option, obviously. So that's something there. But you mentioned punting positions. So catcher is an interesting one, especially on underdog where they're lumped in with infielders and they're not their own unique.
Oh, I think I would definitely punt
thing. I don't know if I've ever drafted a catcher, to be honest. Maybe if it got to the final last round, I took like Wilson Contreras because it was better than drafting some bum from Pittsburgh who's gonna stink. So, maybe in that case, but at price, catchers aren't going like in underdog. So, but if we remove that one from the equation though, or is there something like a position that you're punting, or is catcher the main one?
I don't know, perhaps first base.
And is that because there's depth pieces that you like more? Is that because it's not
like? I think it's deeper than it gets credit for. Like, let me
Andrew Vaughn at first baseman 12, Rizzo at 14.
Right. Like if you go Rizzo at 14, Mountcastle 15, Telez at 16, Ty France at 17, Josh Bell at 18.
I can't believe Bell's that low.
Yeah. First of all, what are you people doing? That's a terrible, he needs to be higher. But I'm perfectly fine with those 5 guys. Heck, I'm even fine with Joey Meneses at 21 if I'm fully punting the thing. Trey Mancini's going at 28. That's a little surprising to me. I know he had a down time in Houston, but it turned out Dusty Baker didn't even want him, so didn't really play him. But no, I just think if you look at Rizzo at 14, can you tell me there's any actual huge difference between him and Matt Olson at 5?
I think the easy way is, you could say Rizzo's almost like a poor man's Olsen, but at the end of the day, we're still talking 25 plus homers and
you're still talking about 25
average.
homers. Yeah, about the same run production, and Olsen probably has a better batting average. But in the end of the day, does batting average matter that much right now in fantasy baseball?
No.
If
you're not an elite separator, if you're middle of the pack, you're not helping, you're not hurting.
Right. If you're not over 300, you're not you know what I mean? So I just don't like Hoskins going at 9. There's no difference between Hoskins to me and Josh Bell at 18.
Other than I'd rather have Bell at price.
Right. Because especially if you're in a league like an on base percentage league, Bell's going to have a higher on base percentage than Hoskins, I think.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. It's, of course, every position you can find the poor man's version of somebody, but there's some places where it's not. So obviously, for me, if I don't get Jazz Chisholm, I'm punting second base and I'm waiting for India and Merrifield. I've already said that. I've made that clear. That's what I've locked in on.
First and second are probably the two that I would punt aside from catcher. Because look, outside of I guess catcher's a little deeper than we give it credit for, but there's still really only 7 guys that are, I would say, separators for me, being Real Muto, Varsho, who also qualifies at outfield, Will Smith, Rutschman, Salvi Perez, I'll still give him credit for that, Contreras, and Kirk. After that, is there that much of a difference between Melendez and William Contreras and Sean Murphy and Stevenson and not really.
No, at that point we're how we talk about in the late round draft, you just need a reason to draft somebody. That's what you're doing with those guys. You're going to look at one thing and buy into, Contreras is hard hit metrics, boom, and that's going to be your basis for taking him at that point. But yeah, those top 7 catchers comfortable with. After that, you're drafting someone based on conviction, or you're trying to do something with your team. If your team lacks power, but you're great in batting average, you might love Cal Raleigh, because that's what it comes down to.
A little bit of an average boost from catcher. K-Bear Ruiz at 14 could help you there because he's probably going to hit 260 something, which is very good for a catcher.
And
Like,
I think you have it right on the head, or hit the nail right on the head. The top 7 catchers you are drafting because they can help you offensively. After that, you are drafting your catcher based on team need. If you need pop, do you need average? Do you maybe need a couple stolen bases from somebody in there? That's ultimately what you're doing at the catcher
right.
position, at least.
Yeah.
But
I mean, but the other thing is the like there's so many catchers that are now in like every other day roles that it doesn't even make that. Like, can you honestly tell me that Sean Murphy is going to play like 120 games and Darno is going to play like 40? No, I think it could be close to a split, especially if half of the Braves rotation likes pitching to Darno better than they like pitching to Sean Murphy.
Yeah.
Then you've got a split there. So at that point, both become less valuable.
Well, and
Right?
then you still have someone too, like Garrett. I think, if I'm not mistaken, of course, by the time this comes out, it might change, but Gary Sanchez hasn't signed anywhere.
No.
Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not hanging my hat on Sanchez, but he's another guy. If he goes into a spot where it seems like semi-regular playing time, he's going to move up the board, and he's going to be a guy that you draft for a little bit of pop.
Yeah.
I mean, I won't be, but someone will. It's just, it's a cup of tea. Catcher is a cup of tea position in fantasy. The top 7 are guys you can trust. From there, it's a cup of tea. It's your personal preference based on your roster. What do you need to try to basically salvage a little bit from this otherwise mediocre offensive position?
Right. Also, who would you rather have, Zunino or Bo Naylor in Cleveland?
How about I take one of the top 7 and we call it a day?
There you go. I mean, so there's teams that you're just avoiding. Like Christian Vasquez has 0 fantasy value.
Yeah, it's
0. Eric Haas has basically 0 fantasy value.
Remember when Grandal was like a top 5 option?
Yeah. I mean, now he's like 20th.
Oh my gosh.
Omar Narvaez is the starting catcher for the Mets. He's going off at 33rd on the board.
Yeah, and of course,
Holmes is the starting catcher for the Cubs, if I'm not mistaken, and he's 35th off the board.
It's one of those things where, of course, everything that we're saying here, well, it does apply, but not as much to 2 catcher formats where you have to start 2, obviously.
I'm in a league with it's 2 catcher formats, and like there are the difference between Real Muto and Varsho and Smith in that league, and like Sean Murphy is amazing.
Would you double tap a catcher like back-to-back rounds if you're at a wheel? Not 1-2, obviously, but like a Real
Muto league and top 7, like let's say half of the top 7 are there. I'm double tapping, and then because the advantage that you can get, like let's say if you can double tap Rutschman and Kirk, the advantage you get doing that and then having to wait on a depth piece at second base. A depth piece at second base is not a big enough difference. Like Ketel Marte, there is not enough difference between Ketel Marte at 20th off the board for second base right now and Tommy Edman going 5th off the board at second base. Like that's not a big enough difference between those two to make me forfeit a top 7 catcher. Like, let's say I take Rutschman and then I go take Edman at second base, and then I have to come back and fill in catcher with, I don't know, Jonah Heim. Like, I'd rather have Rutschman and Kirk and then Marte at second than Rutschman and Tommy Edman and Jonah Heim or Vasquez, right? Like, so I could see myself double tapping catcher. Yeah.
I think 2 catcher setups. I think it's certainly formidable, but we're running out of time here. One last thing I want to throw at you here. We'll talk about the pitcher position really quick. Like I said, we don't have much time. Since January 1st, Brandon Woodruff is the 9th starter off the board. I have pushed him up as high as the 4th starter off the board. Yay or nay? Well, the answer is yeah, I have done it multiple times. So that's not what we're arguing. Is that something that you can get behind? I guess is probably a better way of looking at it.
I think that's fine. Like, he's 9th off the board combined, right? You got Edwin Diaz in there, you got Emmanuel Clase in there. So you got 2 closers. in there. So if you're just talking starters right now, he's the 7th off the board. I could see taking Woodruff over Strider and probably DeGrom.
I did take him above DeGrom and Strider.
I would probably I could take him over Alcantara too.
Ooh, okay. So Alcantara went
Because
third.
here's the thing with Alcantara. If you look at his, I just wrote the player capsule for Alcantara.
I hope you're going to say what I'm thinking.
I think he's in line for some regression.
Well, he's an accumulator.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, he had 6 complete games last year. When's the last time a pitcher had 6 complete games in a season? Like, it's been a while, right? So, and even as good as he was, and I'm not saying he shouldn't have won the NL Cy Young because he should have. I think it was pretty clear. But his strikeout rate dropped last year from 2021. His he got better with walks, right? But his xFIP and Sierra and FIP all said he was probably more of a mid, like about a 3.25 ERA guy rather than a mid twos. So I think you're going to see innings drop a little bit. I think you're going to see the ERA come back up over 3. The strikeout rate is not as high, like it's under 9K per 9. So he's striking out less than a guy per inning. So I would take Woodruff over Alcantara. So for me, I have no problem with Woodruff being the 4th starter off the board.
So
I'm not behind the Strider Strider boost. I'm just not. Like, it was a phenomenal rookie year, but there is no way he gets quantifiably better in his second year than his rookie year was.
yeah, and this draft is the only one I've completed, so this is what I'm going to leave you with. You got one word, okay? The order of starting pitchers off the board before I took Woodruff. It went Garrett Cole, then Corbin Burns, then Sandy Alcantara, then Max Scherzer, and then right before I picked Brandon Woodruff, it was Carlos Rodon.
That's high for a couple of those guys. That's high. Like,
mind you, this person that picked first has to be an American League East diehard because they went Yankee, Red Sox, Yankee, Rays, then a Twin, but then Toronto. They must love the AL East.
Either that or they don't like staying up late to watch baseball and they just want to crack out.
or that.
I don't know that I would have had Scherzer that high. I just made the argument Alcantara shouldn't be that high.
So I got a gift with Woodruff, is what you're saying.
I think you did. Like, Woodruff just keeps proving that he's a 1-2 with Burns. And if you're going to take Burns at 2, I don't see much of a difference that would make, like, if you don't have a problem taking Corbin Burns as a second pitcher off the board, is there that big of a difference between him and Woodruff in your mind to make Woodruff like the 7th starter off the board? I don't think so.
Yep. I am right there with you. Rodon at 5 was interesting. I was happy for that one because I wanted Woodruff really bad. So,
like, I don't think there's going to be that big of a drop off for Woodruff as some others think. Like, I make the comp for me for Woodruff or for Rodon this year is what Gausman did in Toronto. Like, Gausman went from San Francisco to the AL East, right?
Yep.
He's basically a 2-pitch pitcher that sprinkles in a 3rd pitch, right? He uses a lot of movement in his stuff, and he sprinkles in a 3rd pitch. And it didn't really kill him that bad going to Toronto. Now you get Rodon going from the Giants to the Yankees. He's basically a 2-pitch pitcher who sprinkles in a 3rd pitch, and the 2 pitches are elite. Yes. Like, maybe the best 2-pitch combination in baseball, right? Here's the other thing. Yankee Stadium is harder for right-handers than Toronto is. Like, right-handed hitters. Yankee Stadium is harder on right-handed hitters than Toronto is. And Rodon being a lefty, making it next to impossible for lefties to hit him, neutralizes the short porch and left field at Yankee Stadium.
Agreed.
So I don't think there's going to be that big of a drop off. All that said, I don't think he should have been like the third starting pitcher off the board.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, I would have taken Woodruff over him, and I'm a Yankees fan and a Nats fan, but like, I think there's a longer run of success with Woodruff than there has been with Rodon, and I still like pitching in the NL Central against weaker offenses than I do against pitching in the AL East against stronger offenses. So,
assuming you can avoid as long as your starts don't come against Pittsburgh in the Central. I know what you meant.
I mean, okay.
At least 3 of the hitters in that lineup.
I mean, yeah, right.
Maybe 4.
Like, well, okay, but how long until Brian Reynolds is traded?
Let me have it. Let me have the moment for right now. Let's just enjoy it. Let's just
let
the good times roll.
They want apparently a Soto return for Brian Reynolds, which I find hilarious.
I love it. Let's make it happen.
I don't think they're getting it.
I don't either, but I don't either, but
like,
someone
dream,
can hope.
But that's not happening. There's no.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it'd be cool if they got like Soto and Tatis, but it's cool. It happens. I get it.
I mean, but here's the question: like, what are they going to start doing with these prospects? They have a ton of them, and they never call them up, and they never develop them.
Exactly. You just answered your own question. I don't understand what the issue is.
Like, what are they going to do? Like, what?
Listen, the fans can't get more mad than they already are because we're holding on to this pipe dream of what could be. And if you never get to that point of what could be is what it is, then you can't get more mad.
I mean,
like, think about it this way. We always have something to look forward to. There's always some cool prospect that will get to maybe come up, or we'll trade him at some point for some bum. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still holding on to the dream of the Tyler Glasnow, Jamison Time, Mitch Keller 1-2-3 rotation led. I'm still holding on to that dream, and it's 2023.
I mean,
I'm just saying.
Just saying, like
Hutch is back. Like it's basically like 2015 all over again, or whatever year he left my heart.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know what they're doing with all these guys, but they have a bunch of dudes who can play, and they're never going to see the light of day, and they're going to get traded. And I'm hoping against hope that Quinn Priester isn't the next Mitch Keller, because that would just make me very upset.
I mean, hey, Keller wasn't bad last year, about 4 years late, but hey, wasn't bad down the stretch.
I mean, that's true. But
then again, they didn't expect Keller to be a 3.91 ERA across 160 innings either. Like, they were expecting like top tier stuff.
Like
the guy.
Like, Mitch Keller was supposed to be the guy, like in the mold of a Garrett Cole.
Yeah.
Or Glasnow, or even now Shane Baz. Sorry, Colby. But that Archer deal is looking worse and worse by the day.
I already forgot about it. I mean,
giving up Austin Meadows and Glasnow and Shane Baz.
Yep, all for nothing. Gotta love it.
That's not great.
Got to love it. But Matt, that'll put a bow on this week's episode. So, of course, check out everything here at fantasyalarm.com, all the content. Make sure you're privy to any updates with the draft guide that is free. It's the free draft guide. Fantasy Alarm MLB draft guide is free. Can't say that enough. Give me a follow on Twitter at Colby R. Conway. Give Matt a follow at the Selz Man on Twitter. Check out the MLB free agent trackers. We're getting updated. And of course, all of the fantasy baseball content that'll be rolling out here in the days and weeks leading up to spring training and then eventually the start of the season. So that'll do it for this week's episode. We'll see you next week with the newest edition of the Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Baseball Podcast.